This video is part of the series, Scary Stories You Shouldn't Hear. And if you've ever worked the night shift, you know that it comes with a certain loneliness. Sure, there are rare exceptions where you might work somewhere busy or with a solid crew, but usually it's just you, your shadow, and a clock that seems determined to mock you by moving way too slow. It can get creepy. And while we've all had our own share of boring nights, some workers have faced things far worse than boredom. These are 4 disturbing, true night shift horror stories you'll wish you'd never heard. Night Shift Story 1, Vanishing Patient. A Reddit user says they were working as an ER nurse in a busy hospital when a patient came in suffering from shortness of breath. They say because of overcrowding, the patient had to wait in the hallway, so the nurse went to grab some supplies. When they came back, the bed was empty and the patient was nowhere to be found. Security footage showed the man lying in the bed, but then a single frame glitched and he was gone. So why doesn't this make sense? The nurse says they checked everywhere, including the X-ray room, which the patient would have had to go through if he left the floor, and the door to the X-ray room was propped open. So it was clear he hadn't used it. They also checked every other room on the floor and even went outside, although it was against policy and nearly caused them to lose their job. But, to this day, the hospital never explained how the patient vanished, leaving staff to whisper about the ghost who checks in but never checks out. Night Shift Story 2, Factory Footsteps. A Reddit user was working as a security guard at an old textile factory. He says he noticed that every time he patrolled the top floor, he could hear footsteps echoing behind him. But whenever he turned around, he found nothing. Plus, everyone on the night shift knew the top floor was off limits and sealed off with a locked door. But one night he decided to investigate. He unlocked the door and walked up the stairs. And, sure enough, the footsteps stopped. But when he got to the second floor, he found it empty. He checked each room and even the maintenance shaft. It was clear he was the only person up there. He tried to radio his coworker, but he got no reply. Just then, he heard a voice crackle over the radio. It said, "Did you just walk up the stairs?" He replied, "Yeah, who said that?" Then the voice said, "Didn't you hear me? I just saw you upstairs." It was his coworker, and he knew his coworker wasn't upstairs because he'd checked. He thanked God the radio was one way because if his coworker could hear him, he wouldn't want to know what happened next. He ran downstairs, keeping an ear out for any noise. When he reached the first floor, he heard footsteps again. This time they were coming from inside the wall. Whatever was walking those halls didn't want to be seen. Night Shift Story 3, Gas Station Visitor. A Reddit user was working at a gas station in Texas when, one night at around 3 a.m., they saw a woman in a 1950s-style gingham dress come into the store. She bought gum, and after she left, it seemed like nothing had happened. But moments later, the same woman came back into the store wearing the same dress and bought the same gum. It was odd, but maybe she just liked that gum. So the employee shrugged it off. However, the woman came back into the store a few minutes later and did the same thing. Again, the employee was confused, but before they could decide what to do about the situation, the woman came in yet again and did the same thing. One last time. At that point, the employee checked the footage and realized something disturbing. All 3 times the woman had walked into the store, her feet never touched the ground. Night Shift Story 4, Call Center Whisper. A Reddit user was working the graveyard shift in a call center when suddenly the phone lit up. They picked it up and heard a weak voice on the other end. They asked if they could help them, and the voice said, "Yes, please. Can you help me? I need to find the exit." They asked which exit, and the voice whispered, "Any of them will do. I just need to get out of here." Then the voice started to cry. The employee tried to calm them down and ask questions, but they kept cutting off. Just then, another call came in. It was from the same number. They picked it up, and the voice on the other end was gone. The employee heard heavy breathing instead. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the screen went blank. When it came back on, the employee noticed something strange. On the monitor, a shadowy figure was gliding between the cubicles. As they watched, it passed between the rows of desks until it vanished. But before that, the employee could see that it was a man wearing clothes from the 1970s. They checked the security cameras and found that the building's emergency exit was wide open. It stayed that way for hours. The employee closed it, but they never forgot the pale face and vacant eyes of the man who haunted the hallways after hours. They say that night shifts reveal what daylight hides. Some places look normal during the day, but once the sun goes down, things take a turn. Whether it's shadowy figures, ghostly apparitions, or unsettling sounds, these overnight tales remind us that there's something both fascinating and eerie about the darkness. They show us that sometimes what we don't see can be scarier than anything that lurks in plain sight. But now it's time for you to speak up. Which story chilled you to the bone? Was it the vanishing patient, the ghostly footsteps, the floating woman, or the whispering man? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, if you're working alone tonight, you may not be alone. If you enjoyed this video, check out more content just like it. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe and become part of our community.